Everyone, it's Feroshia Knight from Coach Training World, and I'm sitting here screen to screen with the beautiful Dr. Lori Bisbey. And Lori is a phenomenal person on many levels, and one of her secrets to success in life is really helping couples and single people find satisfaction in their life. And so I'm really excited to be with you, Lori, and get to kind of dive into the story behind the story and to really kind of dig into some of those secrets that you might have for our audience today.
I'm so glad to be here, Feroshia. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and I believe it's in the middle of the night for you right now, almost.
Well, yeah, not quite the middle of the night, but we are heading towards the later hours.
Yes, so thank you for taking the time. So I'm wondering, what is the story that led you into this work? There must be something that happened in your life that really made this so important, because this is a big mission of yours.
Yeah, I think I've always felt that relationships and connection were really an important part of life. And all throughout my psychology training and the work that I've done, there's always been this aspect. But I think from a personal perspective, to have a relationship that was successful and lasted and where there continued to be ongoing passion just seemed to elude me. I was 27 when I got married for the first time, and I had met this amazingly handsome and charismatic guy at a conference, and he was from England, and he had one of those really wonderful accents, which is how I ended up living over here. And I fell absolutely head over heels for him, and he kind of oozed sexuality and sensuality. And so you would have thought that that would have been a really good connection, and it looked like it would be. But the reality is that we were together 8.5 years, and we had sex 12 times. And yeah, I did everything. I stood on my head. I screamed, I shouted, I lost weight, I gained weight, I changed my hair, I changed my body. I did everything because I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me that this man who supposedly loved me just didn't want to connect with me physically. Pardon me. Later, I realized it wasn't really me. So I got past that. But initially, it was just devastating. And I thought I was the only person who was in a marriage who had no sex. I thought I was the only one. And I remember it was probably about 6 months before I left. I gathered up all the courage that I had, and I went to this friend who was about 15 years older than I was. And she is a psychologist, and we used to do kind of co-supervision. And I said, I need to talk to somebody about this. So I said, look, he doesn't touch me. No matter what I do, he doesn't touch me. It's been years. And she looked at me and she just said, you think you're the only one? And I said, yeah, I do, and she just said, you're not. And it was that point I went, wow, I wonder how many clients don't talk about this because nobody asks and they're too embarrassed to tell you. I mean, I didn't want to talk to a therapist about it. And I'd gone for therapy because I'm of the belief that if you're going to work with other people, that you actually ought to experience some self-exploration. You actually ought to experience some of the techniques you're going to use. But I didn't want to bring this up with anybody. I was just devastated. I was sure it was a fault of mine. So I did get out of the relationship. I decided, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
And off I went. And then I was 35. And I thought, well, second time lucky, we'll do a better job. But a lot of other factors came into choosing a partner. And the upshot of my second marriage was that we really weren't attracted to each other. And people will say, well, why did you get married? Well, I got pregnant. And so I wanted my child to have two parents. So I got married, which I knew at the time was a mistake because we had compatibility, but it wasn't sexual compatibility. So here I was again, I'm a really sensual person. I enjoy sex. I enjoy uh, being physically close to someone. And here I was again, celibate in a relationship. And I remember waking up one morning after, I think it was, my son was about 3.5 years old. And I thought, what the hell am I doing here? So you'd think I would have learned by then. This time I didn't blame myself. I didn't jump all over myself. I kind of had to look at the situation and thought, okay, there's going to be a solution to this. So we tried to work on the relationship and our sexual relationship for a little while, but it was clear that we just did not have the same interests. So I separated. And in the process, I had a makeover and I did some personal work. Not to figure out what I enjoyed, because I knew that. I've always known the things that turn me on. I just never was comfortable grabbing that. I was never comfortable talking about it. I was never comfortable asking for what I wanted. And by the time I found out that somebody didn't share my interests, it was too late. I was in a relationship and I loved somebody, and then I fell into the trap that so many people fall into, which is to say sex really isn't that important.
Ooh.
Now, I thought about that recently. I had a client sitting with me who was telling me all about the fact that after, 5 years, sex wasn't that important. And she was over 40. And of course, that meant that she wasn't going to have sex anymore. I remember looking at her and saying, I'm over 50. I'm still having sex. What are you talking about? But, it's this story we tell ourselves is not that important. And I looked at this person and I said to her what I said to me, which is, if I'm not having sex with this person I'm married to, that's not a marriage. That's a brother. That's a friend. It's not a marriage. The whole point in a romantic relationship, the extra bit that we tend to go in for is that physical intimacy. So if the physical intimacy is not there, we have to talk about why. It doesn't, and I mean, I hasten to say to people, there are reasons that their physically intimate relationships take a back seat. And there's a waxing and a waning that goes on over time. But it's this myth that we tell ourselves that it's not important, that we don't have a right, that, it's not important. You shouldn't mess up a good thing. And when I was going through it, I don't usually ask my mom for advice about things like this. My parents were married for 55 years, together for 57. It was a different age. But I don't usually ask her for advice about this. But I remember when I got divorced the first time, and I was sitting in the kitchen, and they understood why, because there were other reasons. But I made the comment, well, I haven't had sex in 4 years. And my mother, what came out of her mouth was, that's abusive.
Oh my.
It slapped me in the face because it was so right. She said, it wasn't your choice. I said, no, it wasn't my choice. You talked with him about it. Yes, I talked with him about it. Then if he's denying you that, that's abusive. Because that intimacy is that important in your relationship together. It's a good thing you're getting out. I remember being really shocked at that kind of level of emotion that came behind that. So I thought, okay, I'm going to be really honest with me. What is it that I want? What do I like? What's important to me physically? I'd done all the list about what's important in a relationship and for longevity in terms of getting along with a person and what are my deal breakers. But let's actually look at what I really enjoy sexually. And so I kind of let that stew, and I didn't actually go out looking for somebody. I had a couple of experiences to test some theories out, but I wasn't actually looking for a relationship. And one of the things that I was really clear about is that I'm bisexual. And so for me, monogamy doesn't work terribly well. Now, not all bisexual people feel this way, but I do. Because I don't have I'm not like 90-10.
Mhm.
Sexuality is a bit of a movable feast, and so people can be like 90% heterosexual and 10% homosexual. And so they may not feel it so much if they give up that 10%. But for me, I'm pretty much in the middle. And so when I commit to monogamy, I'm committing to denying myself in a very big way. So for me, non-monogamy works best. Ethical non-monogamy works best. Ethical non-monogamy means that everybody's aware of what's going on and they're open and they're honest and they discuss things. And that's particularly important to me. Lying is the biggest relationship killer that there is. So I started just kind of noticing who I was reacting to and what I was doing. And I decided to go to a conference that I'd been to before, which was a spirituality conference up in San Jose. And I just was relaxed, and I met this guy. And it was one of those situations where I felt it in the solar plexus. It was like somebody kicked me in the stomach. There was that level of attraction. So my initial response to that was, I think I'll walk away.
Mhm.
Because it was really scary. But I stopped myself from doing that, and I took some time, and we spent quite a bit of time getting to know each other. I decided I would go slowly. I would make sure that this was going to work. This aspect of the relationship would work. I can figure out fairly quickly that other aspects will work, but since I knew that I had made 2 really major mistakes previously, I decided to take the time. So it took me 6 years, but I married him last November. So, you know, the happy ending. And I think for me, looking at my own journey, I think it is criminal for people to go through life without that intimate connection. I can't, you know, when I talk with couples and I hear couples talking about the fact, playing down the importance of contact, and it's not just sex, it's actual physical contact with each other. Because what I find, and certainly was true for me, and I find in the people that I work with, if you're having conflict over sex, you don't just stop having sex, you stop approaching each other. And you stop approaching each other because it feels like pressure. So if I come and say, I want to cuddle from you, and I've been asking for sex for weeks, and you don't want to have sex with me, you don't want to have a cuddle with me anymore either. Because you think there's a message in that. There's always an underlying message. And so people live in these relationships where there's actually no physical contact. It's soul destroying. So it's kind of become my mission, really.
Yeah. What is your mission?
Yeah. You know, I'm not, you know, I hadn't planned on it being a mission. I was going and doing all the different bits and pieces that I do, but it really has. I'm 52. My husband is 58. We have a brilliant time together. Neither of us sees any need to stop having a really good time. And I listen to people all the time who say, well, you know, it's too late, it's too late. And all I can say to them is, if I can get up and do it again, so can anybody else.
Yeah. Well, and something I want to emphasize is this wasn't this happened to me last year. This is decades.
Yeah.
Of you really, you know, trying to find your way, not only in the right relationship, but in the right sexual intimacy, you know.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the conversations, you know, the quality, the conditions. I mean, all of those pieces that make up a really healthy, loving relationship that has zest in it and satisfaction.
Yep. And that's the thing. It's that because so often people don't even talk about this bit isn't important. It's supposed to come naturally, you know. I don't know if you know that. It's supposed to come naturally. We don't have to talk about it. You know, and I think, you know, people say, oh, well, younger people, it's easier now. Younger people do. That's not my experience. Younger people are having just as much trouble approaching these issues and talking about things in depth as people my age. You know, it's like six or seven generations I've been talking to over the years. It's just as difficult. Nobody teaches you how to do this. Nobody teaches us to prioritize it. And a lot of the times we don't know if our desires are okay. And I'm not thinking about things like bisexuality or homosexuality. I'm just standard stuff. You'd be surprised how often people are kind of freaked out by just the most common desires. They think that they're weird or they're strange, and they don't want to tell their partner because they're afraid that they're going to get rejected. So they don't know how to ask. So, I mean, I looked at it. I knew what I was interested in and what I liked when I was in my teens. It didn't change. It expanded. I've added some more things. I've tried something. But the basis of my desires, I knew about that in my teens. It took to my 40s before I actually allowed myself to really explore that in a relationship. Like you said, decades.
Yeah, decades. And I'm almost hearing, you and what you also offer for your clients is the ability to write that permission slip to be who they are, to ask for what they need, and to risk that possibility that someone else might not meet them in that place, and then what to do when that happens.
Yeah, and so even if they can't meet them in that place, it doesn't mean the end of things. It's like, let's be creative and let's look at this in a way that will allow people to get their needs met and to gain satisfaction. And that's it's on that deep level. It's not just physical. It's so much about people's emotions and their soul connection to people around them and to the world around them. And even from point of view of physiologically, how much better we feel when we're expressing ourselves fully, and when we don't feel like we have to hide all the time. There's at least one person you can be fully yourself with.
Absolutely. And, I'm curious, because you've offered so much in terms of, the essential elements. When you're working with your clients, what are some of the things that you look at? What are you've talked about communication, preferences, but I'm guessing you probably have a bigger thing that we've that can't talk than what we've talked about.
Well, I mean, I think you look at the communication, the basic skills of communication. You look at communicating about sex as well, and sexuality, and what is all out there. You look at the way people deal with each other around sex. How do you set the scene? How do you make this become natural?
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time with people where the relationship has they've become more distant, and things have become more problematic, or they're stuck in a rut. And so with them, a lot of the focus is often on feeling comfortable spicing things up, feeling comfortable telling their partner what they want. Getting them out of that rut is about changing patterns and changing routines, teaching people how to manage conflict differently around these areas, because it's rejection here feels like the worst thing ever. If somebody doesn't like what you like to cook for dinner, what food you like, or what your hobbies are, it doesn't really feel like it cuts to the core. If they don't like the things you like to do in bed, yeah, that feels awful. So we spend time working around that and helping people get the distance they need to be able to negotiate. And that's one of the things people don't do. They don't negotiate for what they want. We negotiate around everything else.
This is true.
You can have that. We can, on the motorcycle, if I can have the skydiving trip, you can have, we'll go to dinner here, or if we go to dinner there, you're going to work full time and I'm going to go to school, then we're going to switch. We spend a load of time looking at what we get from each other, and whether we're negotiating things that makes everybody feel good, and we don't do that around sex at all. I hear people constantly say things like, well, my sex drive's just higher than his, or my sex drive's just higher than hers, as though there's nothing we can do about that.
When I even see that on the online apps, they'll rate people. You're like, well, wait a minute. And of course, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if they have like this massive sex drive and I'm showing up low on this particular scale, who am I? That's dangerous. I'll disappoint them.
Yeah, well, and we worry about that. Oh, and then there's the whole side thing about body image and stuff.
Oh
Oh
my
my
God.
God. So I end up working on stuff like that. And what's interesting to me is that it's very rarely the partner who's having an issue with, somebody's weight or their aging. It's usually the person themselves that's having the issue. They're sure they're going to be rejected. They're sure they're going to disappoint. And so it's actually working on getting them to listen to their partner, to actually believe when they're being told that they're beautiful and all those sorts of things. So I like to work on things on a number of different levels. Some of it can be quite serious. I mean, I think talking about this stuff can be quite serious. And so some of the one-to-one work can be really intense. And I actually recommend, rather than doing things, I don't really like to do kind of weekly coaching sessions spread out over ad infinitum, because my experience with this stuff is it's so intense that people don't actually make breakthroughs when you spread things out like that. So I like to do intensive work with people. And apart from the intensity, a lot of time spent having fun. So trying to turn the tables and give people the idea of things that they can enjoy. I run retreats. I take people on field trips, so that they can go out. I have field trips are fun. I mean, I've taken people to strip clubs. I've taken people to fetish clubs. I've gone to burlesque shows. And it's all about just opening people's eyes and giving them something else. I teach role play, and so that's kind of the one half of things is the fun, the fun part. And then
what I'm also hearing is by showing them other options, it kind of, desensitizes maybe even the people that are just afraid to ask for, maybe, could we do it twice tonight?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, there's this whole other spectrum. I'm down at this spectrum. This isn't that big of a deal. This is a big deal to me, but this may not be.
I love stuff like that. That's always so much fun, particularly when somebody comes in and says, they're terrified. They're terrified. I'll never forget. I had a young woman who was absolutely terrified to ask for oral sex. Because she was sure that he was going to think she was the most disgusting thing on the planet. And I said, have you ever looked at pornography at all? And so we were talking about that a bit, and I said, okay, well, and I did it as a desensitization. I said, well, have a look at some of the stuff that women have created. And when she was looking at all the different things, she's like, oh, okay, this isn't so bad. Maybe he won't freak out, and it really is a desensitization. Maybe I can do this. Maybe I can move forward with this. And sometimes even rehearsing what happens if the person says no.
Yeah, and building up that resiliency, much like we might have to do in any kind of thing where we're asking or trying to be bigger with who we are and our desires.
And I mean, and stuff like, God, rehearsals. And what happens when everything goes wrong? Because the thing is, you have to find your sense of humor in that. And some of the funniest experiences that I have had have been like when things have gone terribly, horribly wrong. And it may not, you try and reach the laughter in the moment. I'm not always that good. Sometimes I don't get the laughter till years later. But the idea is to be able to relax. You don't only get one chance. You can have a number of chances. It's this weird paradox. On the one hand, I'm really a believer in the fact that nothing is promised. We don't know how long we're going to be here. We don't know what opportunities we're going to get. And so really, it's important to be able to grab things when they come up. At the same time, with most things, you get the opportunity to rehearse a bit.
Yeah, and it actually brings up some research from brain science around relationships and attachment theory. And I know you're familiar with this, but we actually only have to be connecting and making that connection the right way, perfectly, to keep that trust. So there's 70% of the time that we could kind of have a bit of conflict or a failure, and that trust will still be there. It's just that when it's 70% of the time, there's no trust, or I should say 100% of the time, or even more than that, 70, then then the relationship truly is at risk. And I'm guessing most of the time, the reason a relationship really is at risk is no one's talking, no one's having the conversations, the needs aren't getting met. And so, we're not at that trust building, love, stay together type place anymore.
Yeah. And when you're talking about attachment, what's happened is the attachment's fractured.
Yeah.
And most people in that situation will go out and try and form another attachment somewhere else.
And that's why
that's why we see so many affairs. So, you get a fracture, it could stay that way for quite a long time. So I'm not saying someone will run out and have an affair, but after some period of time, the desire for closeness and intimacy and emotional intimacy, even more than physical intimacy, sends people out looking to form some form of attachment. So I'm always starting with communication. And people are like, oh God, do I really need to learn this again? Like, yeah, actually you do.
My favorite question, it's not learning it, let's practice the part of applying it.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the thing. People know so much, but they don't actually move it to the real world. I remember talking with somebody about, therapy and what therapy does and what coaching does and how changes happen and similarities and differences and whatever. And I was fascinated because this person really believed that if you make the change here and you make the change here, you change. And I remember sitting there and saying, yeah, okay, how often have I seen somebody make the change here and the change here and not be able to apply it in the world? They didn't make the physical movement to apply it in the world.
Yeah.
That and so if you don't ever do anything to focus on that, to get moving on that, you'll be talking about it 20 years from now. You'll actually know an awful lot about great communication.
Well, and isn't it the case that it's so much easier when you have a group or, a powerful coach to help you to step into action, and also someone that's got your back, or even a community like in a workshop environment where, you're learning together, so that safe container, really supports that, okay, out of head and heart and into life.
So much so. I mean, I think I do think, there's loads of stuff you can do online, but I do think having that connection and knowing that you can have that safe container is so, so important, because it makes it possible to jump levels instead of kind of tiptoeing along. And this is the kind of stuff that people really, it feels very, it feels very personal. Sounds like a silly thing to say, but it feels very close in, and it is very close in. And so people really have trouble talking. And I remember somebody was talking to me recently about, oh, well, but people, they talk on the internet. And I said, yeah, because a total stranger, if they say, ew, what do you care? You don't know them. Right. So if you're telling somebody your deepest, darkest fantasy, and this total stranger goes, well, that's disgusting. Oh, well, it doesn't really impact. But if you tell, your partner of 5 years, your deepest, darkest fantasy, and they go, oh, that's disgusting, that has huge impact.
Yeah, lots of risk.
Yeah, huge levels. So it's about balancing that and helping people to actually create enough safety so they can start sharing more. And some of that, is about reminding them what it was like when they first met, because they share a whole lot more in the beginning of a relationship, because you're trying to find out who this person is. And then most couples stop. Life intervenes.
Well, and sometimes my experience is it becomes all about the career or the children or the house.
The next stage, the next part of the ladder, it's always interesting to me how often people don't actually spend any time in the here and any time in the now. And so sometimes some of the stuff that I'll do with people is really just about experiencing right now, right here, and see what that feels like. And how can you gain skills in becoming grounded so that you have protected time where you're right here, right now with your partner, and you're not talking about what you're going to do next year, and you're not thinking about the past, but right now, this connection, and how much extra energy it gives you when you have that connection with somebody. Just, that kind of focused, unconditional love kind of attention, that thing that is so elusive and so difficult to grab back.
Yeah, that loving presence. Mm-hmm.
It's establishing that, and how many different ways can you establish that? So I get really excited about it because to me, this is the essence of life, is connection to others. So
It is.
just so amazing. And I love it because I love going out and meeting other coaches and seeing what they're doing and seeing the different ways, the different aspects of what people bring, and the different ways that people use to work with helping people connect to others, because most of the time that's what people are working with. It's either connect to self or connect to others, or both.
Yeah. Are they interrelated or
Yeah.
interconnected? Yeah. Interdependent. There we go.
Yes. I love that word, actually.
I know. Well, I'm curious, there are so many tools and so much wisdom that you have to offer and you've already offered. And for our audience, I'm wondering if you would be willing to kind of toss out 3 of your best tips, for maybe someone that's kind of in that place where they're like, I'm in a relationship, I don't want to let go, but something just, I don't feel connected, I'm not quite getting my needs met. What are some things that they might be able to do just as early as today to kind of get them on the pathway?
Okay, so the first thing that I would suggest is something on your own. So you recognize that you're in this relationship, you're not ready to let go, and you're not feeling connected. Take a half an hour, sit down with whatever your preferred scribing method is. If you want to talk into a tape, if you want to do a video log, if you want to type, if you want to write, I don't care. And do stream of consciousness. What's wrong with the relationship? What needs aren't getting met? What's right with the relationship? What needs are getting met? And after you've spent 10 minutes doing that, 10 minutes just on what, in your heart of hearts, if you could have anything in a relationship, create the picture of what it would look like. Now, that can be very difficult when you're in a relationship, because I'm kind of asking you to put that aside, but that's okay. Just do whatever you can to do that. Once you've done that, once a person's done that, they'll have more clarity. And that's a great place to start a conversation. Sometimes when people do that, they'll say, you know what, although these things aren't good, these things are. And when I look at what I really want in my heart of hearts, 9 out of 10 things are in this relationship. So I want to start trying to make this better. Sometimes people will say, actually, none of this fits. So now I have another conversation I need to have. So that's tip 1, is actually start figuring out where you are before you do anything.
When I'm also hearing with that a very candid, authentic conversation that's just with you, you and you.
Yeah, nothing yet with anybody else, just you.
It's super safe. Yeah.
Yes. And if you feel a need to have some feedback on it, I would suggest don't do it with your partner, your most trusted friend, somebody who has no ulterior motive, which is
A
very
coach.
difficult. A coach. Yeah. I mean, preference is go get some coaching, because I think it's the most useful way to deepen that conversation with yourself before you even go and do
God, isn't
anything
that
else.
true?
I mean, because there isn't an ulterior motive, and with the best will in the world, friends often have issues that come up. But a friend who's like quite separate from the situation and is going to contract with you not to put their viewpoint across is also someone you can talk to.
Good luck with that.
Well,
I can't do it for my friends. I can't.
it is so hard.
It is.
Oh my God, it's so hard, particularly if you hate the person.
Oh my God. Or you're protecting your friend, right? Like, oh.
Yeah, but no. It needs to be a safe space for you to look at you. And then the second thing that I would say, completely different, which is schedule one thing that you usually don't do together, but that's fun. Where you agree, no serious talks, no serious anything. We're going to do something fun, not go out to dinner, which is what we all do for date night.
I know.
I swear to God, you would think that there's nothing more creative anybody can think of. And I can be just as bad, because it's quick and easy, right? You have 2 hours. What are you going to do? Well,
Let's go eat.
Yeah. So don't go out to dinner, although I don't mind if people decide to go to like a cooking class. There's a new place in London, which is it's kind of a pop-up restaurant cooking teaching thing. And she's Japanese and she makes amazing food. And it's called Atsuko's Kitchen, I think. And I want to go there. I mean, that would be a perfect thing. If you want to go for a cooking lesson with your partner, great, go do that. But not a meal. Do something you wouldn't normally do. You don't have to have a lot of money to do it. You know, it could be that you go to a nearby attraction. There's some amazing woods near where I am. I haven't been in years. That could be something you do. It wouldn't cost any money. But do something fun where it's just the two of you and spend at least 2 hours. You can spend more, but you have to allocate at least 2 hours. And I would ask people to commit to doing that once a week for 4 weeks.
Mm. Well, and I'm imagining what that does is it starts to create some positive memories, something to talk about that's the highlight of the week besides what's for dinner, how was your job.
Yep.
So, great. And the third?
Well, the third is to handle conflict, and it's related. You know, we all have the same argument over and over and over again. Couples always have the same 5 arguments, whatever they are. And what happens is people get distant and they find it really hard to come back together. And they start talking again to try to resolve it, and it blows up again, and they find it really difficult. What I'm going to suggest is you do something together, not talk. So you've not been talking to each other because you're angry and you're frustrated. So go make a meal in the kitchen together. Do something every day, ordinary, together. Just kind of agree that you'll start doing it. And again, that's another one where what you do is you bring back some of the positive connection. And by the time you're finished, there's usually the rudiments of positive conversation. And the agreement is you're not going to discuss whatever it was that caused the argument. That's left for another day. So it's that kind of recognizing connection. All of these things are about looking at connection and recognizing that connection. Just do an ordinary thing together. Take the dog for a walk. Clean the windows. Cleaning is a really good one for some reason. I'm not sure why, but it's a really good one. Well, actually, I have theories as to why.
Yeah, what I'm curious about is the movement, just the movement in the body and the energy. Yeah.
Yep. And the other part of it is also one partner is usually cleaner than the other. And it doesn't go along gender lines, folks. Right? There are plenty of men that are living with women who are far messier than they are. And then there are same-sex couples where God knows, so one partner is usually cleaner than the other. So the other partner who doesn't usually do that stuff, getting involved also has a positive effect because they're doing it together.
Yeah. Well, it almost came up just like with the love languages, that gift of service, that could also play in, especially if the person that felt, if the argument wasn't anything around that activity and someone not showing support or perceiving that they're not showing support.
Service is highly underrated. That the willingness to do something for somebody, to fulfill something for them, simply for that, not to get something else, not to be looking for what's coming back from over here, not to be looking for the exchange, is highly underrated. What I recommend for people, if they're really interested in service, is to have a look at Japanese culture. Go have a look at tea ceremony and what's involved in a tea ceremony and learn about why.
Ooh.
It's all about how you treat your guests and what it is that you're creating an experience. And service is at the bottom of all of that. So I highly recommend. That's a great way of reconnecting with a partner. Some act of service is a great way of reconnecting with a partner.
It just occurred to me, and maybe this is along the lines or not, but if the couple went and did a service where someone else besides one of them was benefiting.
That's great. Go to a soup kitchen and serve at the soup kitchen, run a clothing drive, do something that takes it away from. But also the other thing about that is that is that it often puts our own stuff into perspective, which isn't to say that we can't have horrible, terrible things happen to us. I mean, you never know who's having the most horrible, terrible things happening in their lives. You don't know. You can't tell by looking at people. You can't tell by how much money you think they have. You have no idea how people really are. And I say that because I so often people make assumptions on the basis of the fact that somebody looks well, for example. They look well, which must mean they're healthy. And how often people actually, particularly people with autoimmune disease, are not. They look great and they feel awful. So it's that sort of, so because we don't know that, sometimes going out and actually doing something for somebody who you think has it harder than you really puts your own stuff into perspective.
Yeah.
It can really raise connection between the two of you. It can help you put problems into perspective, which isn't to say that they aren't very serious to us, but at least, I can look around and I can say, at least I'm sitting in a house right now.
Yeah.
There's a roof over my head.
Well, it kind of almost goes into play and having more appreciation and gratitude for what the partnership has been able to create and cultivate.
Yep.
Whole nother
And
massive levels here.
Well, yeah, and gratitude, gratitude is one of the things that people who practice gratitude on a daily basis in general are happier. Because they're taking time to recognize the positive things they have in their lives. So it's like because some people get uptight that like is that a spiritual thing, a religious thing? It's not religious and it's not spiritual. It is simply the fact that you're focusing on those positives and you're saying, wow, I'm thankful I have these things. So because you're focusing on all the positives, people tend to, your spirits are lifted, your emotions are lifted.
Well, I'm curious, when someone comes to you and maybe, they come to you and say, I really haven't gotten out there in the world, and they're really curious about life, about sexuality, and maybe they've had a lot of relationships. I'm just thinking about some of my clients who've really had a lot of relationships but haven't found the one. And so in a way they feel like, sexually they feel like, woo, I've got a lot of this, these things happening. It feels really great, but they're missing that other part of it. So they have the sexuality, they feel very satisfied, but they're missing that depth work, that depth, intimate connectedness.
I mean, I get quite a few people who come with one extreme or the other. Usually it's about helping them to actually identify the things that stop them from pursuing something that's more deep and long term. Because it's often, in my experience, we get in the way of our own connections there. If there's reasons that we're not pursuing that. And then if somebody is actually looking at it and saying, I'm willing to pursue this, then it gets into, well, how do you go about that? What kind of a message do you give out? Where do you look for contacts? I'm amazed at how often people do things like, dating apps. A lot of dating apps are hookup apps.
Yes.
So, great for encouraging sex, not so good for encouraging relationships. It's just like, people used to we'd go to the bars and you'd look to meet people in the bars. Not the best place for establishing a long-term relationship. I'll have loads of people complaining because there are a million and one people out there who have actually met their partner in a bar. But as a rule, not the best place. So it's in part, it's two-layered. First, you have to look at, well, what is it? Why am I not getting out there? Why am I happy to get out there and share brief intimacy? But I'm not happy to go any further than that. Now, some people actually aren't even sharing intimacy. Some people are. Some people are out there when they have sex, they're actually making full contact emotionally with somebody and they're really enjoying themselves, but they're limiting it to a brief period. Other people are out there having sex and actually not making any contact at all. And it's two different sets of issues. And you kind of have to look at, well, where are you in this? And what is it you want? I mean, so often people haven't sat down to think about, well, what do I actually want in a relationship? What works for me? What do I want? Or I love people that say, I want a long-term monogamous relationship and this and this and this, and then we'll have kids. And you look at their lifestyle and there's no room for somebody, you know.
Yes.
And that's all I'll say, well, okay, so where are you going to put them? I actually say it that way. Well, where are you going to put that person? Oh, well,
In
she
the
can't.
dungeon.
Yeah.
when I open the door when I want to have contact.
That's right.
The dragon.
Yeah, I'll come on out now. No, you go back. Go on, disappear. You know, I mean, it's like not even considered it. So it's like, okay, well, what? You got to make some room if you want this.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes along, I'll make room. No, it doesn't work that way. If there's no space in your life, it won't come along.
Well, and I imagine it's also the radar. I mean, if someone's that busy and that full, and they're saying, I want this, but all they allow for is maybe that Friday night, go out, you know, woohoo. And then, you know, of course, you don't want that person might occupy not only more space, but more of your heart and that risk.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And I mean but that's what it is. When you said that there is, if there is no space at all, then there's no place to put any of that energy.
Mm-hmm.
And there are loads and loads of people at a certain place in life who have they're set in their ways. They know what they like, they know what they don't like, and will over control a relationship. So brief works best.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Well, I'm wondering, what would be the best way that people could learn more about you? How would you like to direct them?
Okay, so people can come and have a look at the website, theintimacycoach.com. There's regular blogging, so you can get an idea of regular blogging. I run at least monthly free webinars on one topic or another. I usually try to tie it into whatever I've been blogging about most recently. And there's a variety of online courses and downloads and things. And I also keep a little schedule of where I am. I do quite a bit of traveling, and I try and kind of pop in and do chats and speak on platforms and things, and just sort of get to meet people face to face. I attend conferences and stuff. I do more, probably more in the US than I do in Europe. So it's usually the US, England, and Ireland, and Scotland, and Wales. And the occasional pop to Europe at this point, but that'll probably change.
And I believe you also have a free quiz that they can take and learn.
I do. So it's called the Ultimate Passion Test, and it's looking at the 3 keys to that sizzling sexual relationship. And it's a freebie, which will be officially properly up on the website within the next 48 hours. We just redid the graphics, so it'll be available. And if you take the quiz, then you'll get a bunch of feedback as a result of the quiz, and you can be on the list, on my mailing list. I can let you know what's going on. On the front page of the website, there's also a bunch of listings for what's going to be going on in the next month. I usually try to update it month by month. And feel free to contact. Probably email is the easiest, but my phone numbers are also up there, so you can reach me by phone as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Lori. It's been so fun watching you talk about all these things, because in the back of my mind, I was like going, you know, who doesn't need this? Right?
Well, thank you. I mean, yeah, that's my view. I know I'm biased, but I can't. I mean, I think, well, wow, you know, who doesn't need love and connection and enjoyment in their lives? I can't think of anybody. I really, really appreciate your having me. It's so much fun to talk with you.
Yeah, I'll let you go to bed now.
Yeah, I probably should do that. I've got a day of clients tomorrow.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Brilliant. Thanks a lot.
All right, bye-bye.
See you soon. Bye-bye.